Hello and welcome to the first power rankings of the second season of the Overwatch League, the Bowtie Breakdown Power Rankings. I don't know the official name for whatever this is going to be. Maybe it'll just be that. I'm going to go through and rank all the teams how I feel they should be ranked. The number rankings that I put in the expansion team articles probably won't match where I put some of these teams after I did some thinking about it. And then so what I'll do is I'll go through all the 20 teams, talk about each of them just a little bit in the order, and then kind of do an overarching grouping, because I think I have 4 set groups and certain teams that are about the same level. So I will get started. So coming in at number 20, I put the Chengdu Hunters at 20. I think that they will come in as one of the worst teams. Maybe not Shanghai Dragons 0-40, but still pretty low. When you look at the Hunters roster, right, their 2 main DPS players, Yang Xiaolong and Bacon Jack, haven't been in the professional Overwatch scene for over a year. Bacon Jack was in the 2017 World Cup and he played quite well, but he hasn't been there since, and Yang Xiaolong similarly hasn't been there. Now, the one thing the Hunters do have going for them is they have a team of all Chinese players, so they all will speak Mandarin, they won't have a language barrier of any sort, and they do have 5 players that are coming over from Chinese contenders on established teams. But the thing that you have to remember is many people aren't sure how high level cap the Chinese scene is, so you have to take that with a grain of salt, which is why I have the Hunters at the bottom. I'm not going to say that they're going to be downright awful, but until I see otherwise, I do believe that they will come in as the worst team in the league. At number 19, I have the Washington Justice. This is another thing where I don't trust them yet. A lot of these lower teams and a lot of the places that I will have some teams ranked will be because I do not trust them as of yet. The Washington Justice have a bunch of players from China, Korean and NA contenders, but they also have 3 returning Overwatch League players. So they have Janice that they brought over from the York Excelsior, they brought Otto over from the Shanghai Dragons, and Guido from the Seoul Dynasty. Another thing that Washington has going for them though is that Wizard Young, NYXL's coach from Season 1, is on the Justice, so we will get to see how much of NYXL's success really was from Wizard Young. If a lot of it was, then we should expect Washington to do well, but again, I don't trust a lot of these players. The players that came over from NA contenders are Fozix, who came over from Envision, Corey came over from Gladiators Legion, and Stratus came over from NRG. The players that came over from Korean are Haidnu and Samsung. Now, there will probably be a language barrier because Corey and Fozix are not Korean. They are Western players. So they're going to have a language barrier of some form that they were going to have to overcome early on. Jonas has had extensive playtime, so has Otto. Guido had a little bit on the Seoul Dynasty, but he was playing musical chairs with Toby and with the other supports they had over there. So his playtime isn't extensive as Janus and Otto had. But again, Jonas was the secondary main tank for NYXL, as Mono was pretty great. So I have Washington at 19. I don't really think that they're going to be awful, just like I said about the Hunters, but until I can see more, I have them placed this low. I just need to see how good they will be. Number 18, I have the Toronto Defiant. They have one of the smaller rosters coming into Season 2. They only have 7 players. 3 of them are from Korean contenders, 1 is from NA contenders, and 3 are returning Overwatch League players. The returning Overwatch League players are Envy, who was the flex tank for the LA Valiant up until Space turned 18, and then he was set aside and was then traded away to the Toronto Defiant. Neko comes from Boston. He played pretty well early on, but started to fall off. Him and Kellex didn't really play too well towards the end of the season, and then Asher comes over from the LA Gladiators, who didn't have much playtime later on in the season. He mainly played as the Tracer. He was mainly their Tracer player, so I imagine that he's going to be the McCree and Tracer player for Toronto. Also coming in are Ivy, Stellar, and Yakpong, who come over from O2 Ardent in Korean contenders, who played pretty well, and then Aid comes over from GGEA, which is the Houston Outlaws Academy team, or was. Now the team has since disbanded. Toronto, I'm not entirely sure how much talent they've got on the roster. I'm not going to say that Asher's bad. Asher, Neko, and Envy are good in their own right, but they were traded away for a reason, mainly because they had better players coming in. It'll be interesting to see. I don't think there will be much of a language barrier that Toronto is going to have to overcome like many of the other teams because they're all Korean. But they're still going to have a slight problem making sure that they can get themselves up to a higher level, which is why I have them placed at number 18. Number 17, I have the Florida Mayhem, largely because they dropped all of their Western players except Tavik. Logix, Manitin, Swoosh, Zepasai, Zepe, and Zap is gone. But they kept Tavik, they kept Awesome Guy, and they kept Saya Player, and then they brought in 6 other Koreans. So it's 8 Koreans and Tavik. I don't know where Tavik is going to, where his place is going to be on the team. They brought in Apply and Hagapun from Mayhem Academy, and they brought in Swan from NRG Esports. They brought in Zephyr, the flex tank from Seoul Dynasty, the secondary flex tank to Zumba, and they brought in Chris and BQB from Korean Contenders. Those are great. Those are good players, and they will probably mix pretty well with Awesome Guy and Saya Player, who were great players. I don't know where Tavik is going to be. I'm not sure why they kept Tavik on the team. They should have just let him go to be on a different team to shine. They have to have had plans for him to keep him here. I don't know how they're going to use him. I think Florida's going to mesh pretty well, but it's a bunch of new players. When you bring in 6 new players to only add to 3 returning players, you're going to have a bit of a cohesion problem. So I have them ranked this low until I can see them gel. They'll probably come in on a slow start, but then once things get rolling, they'll steadily climb up the ranks. But I have them down here just for the time being to see how these new players will integrate. Number 16, I have the Guangzhou Charge. Now, the thing with the Charge is they're a bit unique in terms of the expansion teams. They have a lot of international players. They have an international roster. They have, they have 6 Chinese, Korean players, right? In Shara, Happy, Rio, Wanjali, and Hotba and Shu. Now, 4 of them, Shara, Happy, Rio, and Wanje Lee, are all from Metabellum and Korean Contenders, so they've got pre-existing synergy. That's great. They brought in 2 Chinese players, Eileen and Only Wish from LGD Gaming in China. And Eileen put on a great showing in the 2018 World Cup. They come from LGD Gaming and Chinese Contenders, who placed 2nd place in both Contender seasons that they were there. Now, the interesting thing here is that they have Kib and Nero, who are both Western players and speak English. So they have 3 languages that they have to try and kind of mesh together in order to make this roster work. Now they have a little bit of a bonus. They brought in Hoppa from the Philadelphia Fusion, who played extensively in the later stages and subbed in and out with Poco. So they have that Overwatch League talent, a little bit of a veteran presence. The thing that really concerns me is the language barrier. Yes, they have pre-existing synergies, the group of 4, the group of 2, but it's a language barrier. I mean, when you have Mandarin, Korean, and English, right? If you look at the Shanghai Dragons from last season, they couldn't get Mandarin and Korean. They just weren't meshing. So the Charge, I think, until I see that they have solved their language barrier problem, I'm going to keep them this low. It's kind of a safety net. Just like it was for Florida, I need to see how well they mesh, which is why I have them at number 16. At number 15, I put the Atlanta Reign. With the Reign, they remind me a little bit of Boston last year. They brought in a lot of lesser-known players, and then we're going to see how they work. They brought in Koreans, and they brought in European players and NA players, but they also brought in a Chinese player. Dako and Pokpo are from Element Mystic. That's the tank line from Element Mystic who played great in Korean Contenders. So it's good that their tank line has a pre-existing synergy. They brought in Erster from Lucky Future Zenith and Chinese Contenders, but then they have a bunch of NA and EU players. Kodak and Masa come from EU Contenders. There aren't many players from EU Contenders in the Overwatch League. They're both supports, so it's good that they speak the same language. And they brought in Enlayer from Last Night's Leftovers. They brought in Gator, who is going to be a 2-way player in NA Contenders for Atlanta's university team. And then the Dark Horse player, they brought Defran back. So Defran, everyone knows who Defran is at this point, has been out of professional Overwatch for over a year. He was a part of the Selfless roster that went on the massive run in NA Contenders alongside Sinatra. He's a great player, but he has mental problems in terms of similar to XQC. So it'll be interesting to see if he's able to hold himself together. If he is, he can be one of the best hitscan players in the world. So he's a good pickup for the team if they can keep him under control and keep him balanced. I think Atlanta's going to have a lot of shuffling to do in terms of which they have 3 DPS players, 2 main tanks. Now Gator is a 2-way player, so Pokpo is probably going to be their main tank that stays there for most of the season. But they have a language barrier between their main tank, their tank line, their DPS line, and their support line. So they're going to have to solve that language barrier and get some cohesion together. I think they'll be a good team, better than a good number of the other expansion teams, but I just have to see more. That's going to be a common theme throughout a lot of these expansion teams, is I can't put them higher because I'm not entirely sure how they're going to perform. Number 14, I have the Boston Uprising. Now, the reason I have the Boston Uprising this low is they got rid of a good number of players. They got rid of 6 players. They got rid of Striker, who was their carry, to be frank. And they brought in 5 other players. Now, a lot of them are English speakers. They did bring in a South American player, which is great, Alamayo from Brazil Gaming House, who has been doing great in the South American contenders. But the rest, 3 they brought in from Toronto Esports. They brought Axiom, Color Hex, and Fusions. Fusions played out of his mind for Team UK at the World Cup, so we all know what he can do. Laze they brought in from Gladiators Legion. Now the players they kept Kelix, Note, Gamsu, and AimGod. Note and Gamsu were a great tank duo. Kelix struggled towards the end of Season 1 of the Overwatch League with his Mercy play. We'll need to see if he's able to bring himself back up, but it's mainly because they brought in so many new players and they got rid of their carry and Striker. So I'm not going to be able to place them any higher. I have them placed at 14th because they still have Gamsu and Note. They have a good solid tank line, and they have Huck, who is able to meld a bunch of players. I mean, coming into last season, nobody really expected Boston to do anything. So I have them, giving them a little bit of a benefit of the doubt that the 5 new players that they have are going to come in and gel to a good extent off the bat and make Boston do pretty decently. Now at number 13, I put the Shanghai Dragons. Now some people go, well, they went 0-40 last season. How can you place them at number 14 above teams like Boston, teams like Florida and the Hunters, some other expansion teams? It's because they got rid of 8 players. That is pretty much the most that any returning team has gotten rid of, and they kept the 3 of their best players in Dia, Fearless, and Gaguri. And then they bring in 5 other Korean players and a Chinese player. Diem is coming from Lucky Future Zenith and Chinese Contenders, where he played great. The 5 new Contenders team players that they bring in are all from only 4. They're bringing in 4 new Korean Contenders players, all from Chengdu Panthera, who play second behind Runaway in Season 2 of Korean Contenders. So that is going to really, really help their cohesion. 2 supports and 2 DPS, well, there you go. All you have is Dia add in and then add Fearless and Gaguri, and you've got yourself a solid team. So I give the Shanghai Dragons a lot of benefit of the doubt because they kept the 3 best players arguably on their team, and they're bringing in 4 players from the same team. They're bringing in Guardian and Dia, Guardians from Toronto, Dians from Lucky Future Zenith. And I think that with those pre-existing synergies, they're going to be able to really get themselves together, and I do see them getting double-digit wins at least in Season 2. Bigger improvement. You can't really get much worse than 0-40. I place Shanghai Dragons above Boston easily because I think their new additions are really going to help them out. And number 12, I have the Spark. I think the Spark are going to be a great team. They brought in all but 3 Korean players. I think the Spark have good players coming in. They could, I don't have them higher, just like with several of the other expansive teams. I can't put them higher until I see how they play in the Overwatch League. Because when you bring in these expansion teams that have a lot of Korean, Chinese, and a European contenders talent, those scenes aren't as developed as the Overwatch League, arguably. And so even though they may play really well in contenders, they may not play super well in the Overwatch League. But I have them placed higher because I think the level of talent they have in there, every single one of the players they brought in played in contenders at some point recently, unlike other expansion teams that are bringing in some unknown factors like the Hunters do. I think the Spark will be the strongest of the 3 new Chinese expansion teams. They're about middle of the pack for me, where I have them placed. Once I see more, I'll be able to shift them up or down, but this is where I have them placed right now. At number 11, I have the Dallas Fuel. Now, they did look good at the end of Season 2 in Stage 4, so I'm going to let them ride that momentum, but I'm not going to let them ride out too much. They did lose Coco, Chips, and Seagull. Now, Coco and Chips didn't really play too much in Season 1, so those losses aren't too big. Now, they did lose Seagull, and that's the concern for me. Seagull was their really good flex player. He could play the Project, all the off-meta heroes, basically, and he was their diva player when Mickey played Brig. Now, with Seagull gone, they need to bring in people to replace him. Now they brought in Closer from the London Spitfire, RCK from Team Gnanti and EU, and they brought in Zachary from Fusion University. Closer, I can see why Closer can fit in, but he speaks Korean. Of course, he is a Korean player because he comes from London Spitfire. So that's going to be good in helping out Effect and helping out OGE to have another Korean speaker. RCK is a great diva player and a great flex tank. He was doing wonders for Team Giganti. So him and Mickey are going to be the two that are going to shuffle around that diva role and shuffle around the off tank role as much as they need to. Now, Zachary coming in is the little bit of a question mark for me, right? Because Dallas has AKM, Effect, and Taimu already. AKM and Taimu play hit scan. Zachary largely was the hit scan player for Fusion University and NA Contenders. He did play a little bit of Pharah, he played a little bit of Genji, but they have Effect to do some of that. So it's going to be interesting to see how Zachary fits into the Dallas Fuel. I think Dallas will do great. They have their 7 returning members. OGE is a fantastic main tank. He'll be one of the best in the league. And Effect was an outstanding DPS when he was playing. So I have Dallas where I have them. I think that they are only going to go up from here. I don't see them falling too far. I don't see them coming out slow. I think they're going to come out swinging. I think they've solved some of the problems, a lot of the problems with Arrow and with Jane coming in as their for coaching staff. I think Dallas is going to do great in Season 2. All right, we're breaking into the top 10 now. At number 10, I have the Paris Eternal. Now, the Paris Eternal are the second highest expansion team I have placed on here. And it's largely because they're all European contenders talent, except for 3 of the players. Those 3 players all are pre-existing Overwatch League players. Finzi comes from the LA Valiant. He didn't get too much playtime. He's a flex tank. We'll see how much playtime Paris gives him. But the 2 stars on Paris that really help this team get into that top 10 are Soon and Shadowburn. Soon was the carry for Valiant, and Shadowburn was an amazing player. If EQO wasn't there, Shadowburn would have done just as well. So Soon and Shadowburn are really the 2 biggest players on this Paris team that are going to help them reach great heights. And because the rest of them are all coming from EU contenders, they've all played against each other, they know how each other work, they all speak pretty much the same language. English is the language that most of the players speak in EU contenders, so a language barrier isn't going to be there. And I think them all being EU, it is the only all-European team in the Overwatch League, and that's going to help them greatly in terms of building synergy quickly. I think Paris is going to come out swinging to catch some of the other teams off guard, because the thing with having this many contenders players coming in on a team and then having Soon and Shadowburn, no team can really prep for you. Yeah, they can watch your contenders VODs, but they don't know how you're going to perform in the Overwatch League. So I think Paris has a little bit of a leg there with their 2-star DPS players and then bringing in all this other EU contenders talent. I think Paris is looking in good shape to start the league, and then we'll see where they go from there. At number 9, I have the LA Valiant. Now, you could argue the Valiant could be a little lower because the biggest loss, they lost Soon. Without Soon, they're having to play KSF at that DPS role and Bunny if they need to. KSF did not play much at all in the first season of the Overwatch League. He's not going to be able to fill Soon's shoes. I'm just going to say that now. I do not believe that they're going to be able to do the same things that they were able to do with Soon. So I don't have them. I have them in the top 10, but that's only because I don't know if I can trust the rest of the teams below them. Valiant pretty much kept the rest of their team. They brought in Kuki from the Seoul Dynasty. I don't see him getting much playtime because Fate is a fantastic main tank. He may sub in every once in a while. Maybe they'll specialize Fate and Kuki on different map types so they can sub them in and out. Space is one of the best, if not the best, off tank in the league. Agilities is a great player. Now they have Izayaki, who didn't play much because Kareev and Custer are a great support duo. We'll see if he gets a lot of playtime. I don't see it happening, but I have the Valiant at 9 because of the loss of Sin. Number 8, I have the San Francisco Shock. They have a great tank lineup, great main tank and super, and I think that Nevix is a fantastic off tank. Now, the thing with the Shock, right? They brought in Rascal, Smurf, Violet, and Striker. They brought in Smurf from GGEA, Rascal from NRG, who was originally with London, who was then with Dallas, and when he was playing for NRG, it looked like he was smurfing. He is a fantastic player, a great pickup for the Shock. Smurf comes from GGEA. I don't see him getting too much playtime because Super is great. Violet comes from O2 Ardent in Korean contenders, and then Striker comes from the Boston Uprising. The signing of Striker is the one that confuses me the most because they now have 4 or 5 DPS players. They have Architect, Baby Bay, Sinatra, Rascal, and Striker. Sinatra, Architect, Baby Bay, and Striker all have similar hero pools in that they play a lot of hit scan. Sinatra and Striker specifically have very similar hero pools, and I'm not sure why they brought in Striker. It could be for a bargaining chip to get a better player later, but that is the question mark for me. It's not gonna hurt them. That's why I have them placed at 8. But the Shock have now 5 DPS players. You're not going to need 5 DPS players. You have 2 main tanks, 2 off tanks, 3 supports, but you have 5 DPS players, most of which play hit scan. So I don't know what the rotation's going to be. They lost Dante. If they still had Dante, 6 DPS players would be absurd. Dante went to the Houston Outlaws, so they don't have his Sombra, but I don't think that's going to hurt them too much. I think Shock will be great. It would be interesting to see how they flex out these 5 hit scan DPS players. Architect does play Genji, Striker can bust it out, Rascal plays all sorts of stuff, but I don't see all 5 of these DPS players on the roster come at least stage 2. I see 1 or 2 of them getting traded away for another player. I think they were Rascal and Striker. Rascal was brought in to be better, but I really do believe Striker was brought in to be a bargaining chip and a trading chip for another player. Now at number 7, I have the Houston Outlaws. It's difficult to rank the Outlaws because the Outlaws benefited from whatever the meta was. When it was more Junkrat based and when they could rely on not having to play dive, the Outlaws did great. The meta of Season 2 is going to be heavily dependent on how well they do. Mendo, Clockwork, and Fact, they let Factfiction go, who now plays on Mayhem Academy. Mendo and Mendo is now mainly a community manager, he's a streamer, and Clockwork is mainly now in a coaching role. So they kept everyone else and they brought in Dante. They brought in Dante, who plays Tracer, Sombra, and Genji. Jake can play Genji, Linkster can play Genji, Arhan can play Genji. I don't see him playing Genji too much. His Tracer and Sombra play is the big reason why the Outlaws picked him up, but Tracer isn't in the meta as far as we can tell, so the pickup for him is a little late. I really think they should have done it in Season 1, but the thing with the Outlaws is it's really a meta game. If they come in to if Season 2 starts and it's GOATs like it is right now, I think the Outlaws will do great. Spree is an outstanding Zarya. Coolmat and Muma make up a great tank line. Arhan, Linkster, and Jake can flex things, and Bonnie was popping off on Team Canada on that Lucio, and then Raucus's Ana is out of this world. He hasn't played it in a while, but it's amazing. So I have the Outlaws placed as high, sheerly on the fact that I think GOATs will still be the meta. If GOATs is not the meta and Tracer comes back, the Outlaws may struggle. It's really a meta game. They'll shift up and down these power rankings dependent on that. I'm giving them the benefit of the doubt, placing them this high because they kept their core roster pretty much and then brought in another player who speaks English. Arhan's the only Korean. I think that they're going to do great if the meta benefits them. At number 6, I have the Seoul Dynasty. Now, they were really iffy, similar to the Outlaws, throughout all of Season 1. People pointed out maybe they didn't have a main tank. I mean, they put Jae-Hong on the main tank. They kept Fleta, Munchkin, Jae-Hong, Toby, and Zumba, but they got rid of a lot of those secondary players that they were subbing in and out. They got rid of Kuki, Zephyr, Miro, Guido, Wakid, and Gambler. So they got rid of their main tank in Miro. They got rid of their main tank in Kuki, and instead, they brought in Marvel and Fissure. The signing of Fissure is really the reason why I have them at number 6. I'm not going to say that Fisher's going to excel them into a top 5 team, but it is very possible. We saw what he did with the Gladiators. But it's the question of, was also missing, was that main tank? And if the answer is yes, then Fissure should be able to come in and do a lot. Now, they also brought in Jexi, Fitz, and Michelle, all from, 2 from Korean, 1 from Korean contenders, 2 from Chinese contenders. So they have the Mandarin Korean language barrier that I think they're going to be able to solve. If Jae-Hong is able to play his Ana and Toby's able to play his Lucio, then I think they're going to be... Jexi was an outstanding Lucio in Chinese contenders, so him and Toby may have a bit difficult, but Jexi also had a better Mercy, which I think is why they brought him in. But I think that allows Fleta, Jae-Hong to be able to synergize with Fissure. If Ana can come back, I think Seoul's going to do great because Ru Jae-Hong is going to be able to flex on people as Ana. At number 5, I have the Philadelphia Fusion. The thing with the Fusion, I have them at number 5 purely on the fact that they were looking really good at the end of the season, but then got dumpstered by London. Fusion lives and breathes by how well Carpe plays. So they could be anywhere from a top 5 team to almost losing to the Shanghai Dragons last season and down into the bottom 5. Right now, I'm giving them the benefit of that. I think they're going to come out swinging. They got rid of Hoppa, Shadowburn, Dayfly, and Joe Meister. Dayfly and Joe Meister didn't really play too much. Shadowburn didn't either. Now, the thing that concerns me is they got rid of Hoppa. In the grand finals and throughout the playoffs, they really liked running that Sato-Hoppa combo, but in the grand finals, Sato looked lost, even with Hoppa there. So getting rid of another his Korean partner at that off tank means that Poco is going to be the main off tank. If I'm the Fusion, I play Fraggy. I play Fraggy Poco until it doesn't work anymore. They brought in Elk to be another support with Boombox and Neptuno. I think their support line's great. Their DPS line is great as long as Carpe is on fire. Snillo is a two-way player. He's playing for their university team but can come in if he needs to. But Carpe and EQO need to be able to do well, and as long as Fraggy is reined in a little bit and Carpe doesn't fall off a cliff, if he's hot, the Fusion are a scary team, but if he's cold, they're a really low team. I have them placed at 5, giving them the benefit of the doubt, saying they're going to come in swinging, but as soon as they let off the gas, they're going to be awful. At number 4, I have the LA Gladiators. I think the Gladiators are the best non-all-Korean team that the league has to offer because they just have a great number of talent. If it weren't for London going Super Saiyan again in the playoffs, I think the Gladiators could have taken it pretty much all the way. They got rid of Silk Thread, Asher, Remix, and Fissure. Silk Thread retired. They sent Asher to the Toronto Defiant. Remix is now with Sky Foxes and NA Contenders, and they let Fissure go to the Seoul Dynasty. Now, so that means that they don't have a main tank. But to fix that, they signed Roar from Chengdu Panthera. They also signed Decay and Rippa. Decay is from Chengdu Panthera as well, and Rippa is from Team Giganti. I think Roar and Decay are great pickups. I'm not going to say off the bat that Roar is going to do as much for Gladiators as Fissure did, but he's definitely an upgrade over what they had with Remix. Decay will sub in and out probably with Hydration and Surefour. I think that DPS trio is going to be really scary coming into the league. And then Rippa is a great support player, another Finnish player to pair with Shaz and Big Goose. I think the Gladiators are going to be a great team coming into the second season. Until it's seen otherwise, I really do believe that they are the best non-Korean team that the Overwatch League has. Now, coming into the top 3, at number 3, I have the Vancouver Titans. They are the highest expansion team that I have on here, and it's mainly for one reason and one reason only. They signed all of Runaway. All of Team Runaway from Korean contenders. Now, the thing with Runaway, right, is even though a lot of people say, well, they're from Korean contenders, their skill ceiling may not be as high as you think it is. But the thing with them is that their core, Bumper, Hoxel, Janu, Slime, Stitch, a core of a good decent amount of the Runaway core has been playing since the early Apex days, which means they played against people like Mono, they played against people like, say, Bilby. They played against several other players that are now in the Overwatch League that are really high caliber. They played against Prophet, they played against Birdwing. So they've been playing forever. And if there was players that are snuffs from Season 1, it's definitely the players from Runaway. They are the best players that weren't in Season 1. I think they're going to come out and they're just going to blow people out of the water. Now, the one caveat that people may argue is the history of pre-existing teams coming into Overwatch League aren't very good. Seoul and Dallas came and face-planted in the first season. Now, NYXL in London, they did fix things going through, but I think Vancouver, until I am shown otherwise, I think Vancouver is a top 3 team easy. I think they could contend with New York and London. I think that they are a fantastic team coming in. Every member of that team is outstanding, and they're really going to blow people away as long as they play the way we know they can play. Now, at number 2, I have the NYXL. The NYXL kept their main roster, but they dropped Janice, and instead they brought in 2 other players from NA contenders from XL2. They brought in Flower, who everyone will remember from 2017's Korean World Cup team, and they brought in Nene. Nene was a fantastic player, probably one of the best players in NA contenders. Flower fell off a little bit, wasn't as good, but is still a great player. So the DPS quad of Libro, Sebilby, Flower, and Nene, I think is going to be one of the scariest in the league. Jonak, Arc, and Onimo is probably the best support line. Mono and Meko are one of the best tank lines. Pine is going to be interesting to see how much they use him. If Widow isn't really in the meta, I don't see him getting much playtime, but I think New York is a strong team. But it will be interesting to see if Wizard Young was a really big part of their success. Now that he's gone, if they fall off, that wouldn't surprise me, because that means that Wizard Young was really the reason that they played so well. But I have them at number 2. I think them falling off in the playoffs was more so them not being prepared for it. I think they're going to come back, fix themselves, and be one of the best teams in the league. Last but not least, at number 1, I have the London Spitfire. To not put them at number 1 would be disrespectful to the London Spitfire. They only got rid of Closer, who they sent to the Dallas Fuel, and they picked up Guard and Krillin. Prophet and Birdring is the best DPS duo in the league. They bring in Guard from Element Mystic, who's going to be a great addition to the team, because that means that Birdring can then sub in and out with him, because he didn't play at the highest level throughout all of the Overwatch League. Prophet was consistent, so now Prophet has another DPS partner that he can rely on alongside Birdring. And then Krillin, they basically picked up from the ladder. We don't know much about him. I think he's going to be a good addition to Bdoshin and Nuss, but I think that Bdoshin and Nuss should be the two that they stick with. Fury and Jester are an amazing tank line. I think London is the best team in the league until I am shown otherwise. I think that they're going to come in and dominate everyone until someone figures them out. So that's my power rankings for now. So in terms of grouping, so I said they were grouping. So I think that the Hunters, Washington, Toronto, Florida, and the Charge are all in what I would call the bottom tier. You could argue that the Charge could be a little higher, but I think those 5 teams are all relatively the same in terms of what I expect them to come in with. I don't have high expectations for them. Atlanta, Boston, Shanghai, Spark, and Dallas are all about the same as well. Now, Dallas could move up a little bit. I think they could be in the next tier. I just need to see more. I have them at the very top of that. In the top of that area. The next group, I have Paris, Valiant, Shock, Houston, Seoul, and Philly. Now, Seoul and Philly could be higher. I think that their skill ceilings are a lot higher than Paris than the other 4, but they also have the ability to fall off a cliff. Philly could fall into below Shanghai even if they're not playing too well. I have them there as the benefit of the doubt. And then the top 4 teams, the Gladiators, the Titans, NYXL, and London, are the 4 best teams in the league. But I do believe that Vancouver, New York, and London have a big gap over the Gladiators. I think the top 3 teams in the league have quite a ways between them and the next closest teams. Several of the teams are about the same. So these rankings are kind of eyeballed and could easily shift if there's a preseason. I'll make sure I do one after the preseason. But then once the league starts up, there could be shuffling if the Hunters could come out swinging and they could excel themselves at the top. But for right now, the preseason, if there is a preseason, this is where I think all the teams should be ranked. You can take this all with a grain of salt. This is just my opinion, what I think with the new additions and new expansion teams, and this is how I think the hierarchy of teams is coming into the second season of Overwatch League. I don't have a name for this yet. I hope that I'll come up one for future power rankings. I hope that everyone enjoyed. Take care.